So hello everybody, it's James from Posture Stars. Thanks for coming back again. Today I'm really excited to be talking with Kerrie-Anne Bradley from Pilates At Your Desk, who is an author, a Pilates instructor and works with corporate and individual clients to help them get moving at their desk. Good morning, Kerrie-Anne.
Hello.
How are we today? You're down in Summerfield in the south of England.
Somerset, yes.
Somerset, You're not in a field at all, are you? You're in Somerset.
There's a field across the road.
Oh, I'm jealous.
Yes, it's quite sunny here today, sounds like it's not the same in Stockport, but...
No, it's miserable in Stockport. Thanks for asking.
It's not sunny, it's a bit cloudy, but it looks nice. I just haven't been outside yet.
Oh, well, it's always a good idea to get outside. To our listeners, if you haven't been outside yet, get outside and get some fresh air. Don't just sit there at your desk. Make sure you get moving. Which brings me rather neatly in terms of getting moving to you've just released a book. Is that right, Kerrie-Anne?
Yes, move more at your desk.
Brilliant. So, those of you listening to this, if you're at your desk, we've got some good advice for you later. I've got 3 simple questions to ask Kerrie-Anne in our series about posture. So let's get going. Question 1, Kerrie-Anne, what is posture?
Gosh, to me, I like to think about posture as how you organise your body in space. So whether you're moving through space, lying down, sitting or standing.
That all sounds very movement-based and dynamic from a movement-based instructor. Okay, well,
how you stack your bones.
How you stack your bones, yeah. And some of you will be standing listening to this, some of you will be in public transport or running or on a bike, and some of you will be stacked badly in a chair at your desk as you slump over and listen to us. So hopefully we've got some good advice for you coming up. So my second question to Kerrie-Anne is, what exactly do you do to help people's posture?
Well, me personally, I help them to think about how they can sit better or stand better so that they stack their bones more happily, to create the most balance that they can within their asymmetrical structures. And I also guide people through movements which will help towards creating more balance throughout the body through a series of flexibility, strength and alignment techniques. Pilates movements and function.
Pilates movements. Yeah, great. So we're in I don't know when you'll be listening to this, dear listeners, but we're in the transition to hybrid working. So lots of people have started working from home at the moment. In your experience, Kerrie-Anne, do you think people are moving more or less as they're working from home-based environments?
I don't think it's one or the other. I think it depends on the person, really. So I think if someone who typically doesn't move very much unless needing to move to get somewhere, then you may have found that you move less at home, i.e. because you're not commuting and so on. For those who are fairly active and actually have welcomed the fact that they have more pockets of time, either because they're saving on the commute or whatnot, then they may well be doing more movement at home. There are benefits to I suppose part of what I've been doing throughout lockdown is encouraging people to move while they're sitting at their desks. One of the things that I hear repeatedly from clients is that it's all very well saying all this stuff, but the fact is that we have back-to-back meetings all day and it's very difficult to move. So I try to create ways of flipping how they think about that and thinking, right, well, I've got a minute before the next meeting moves, so I'm going to roll my wrists, or I'm going to do 3 squats up and down from my chair, or I'm going to move my spine sideways or rotate it. Or so to within that limited amount of time that they have available to them, to still think of ways and hooks to slot in more movement through the day.
So, to you and I, it's really obvious that we want to move more during the day, particularly if we're sedentary. But to some listeners, they might be thinking, well, what are the benefits of actually doing these movements?
Well, at the very least, and probably the outcomes that I like to focus on mostly, probably because I'm a movement teacher and do movement of this nature, is that at the very least it will leave you feeling less stiff, and with fewer aches and pains. It's not normal to have loads of shopping list of aches and pains when you're like 40, although many people tell me that is normal, because it's a sign of getting old. Well, it's not. You just have to move more and move well as well. So understanding how you move, so you get the less up for it bits to move more, and the bits that love moving lots to move a little bit less. So fewer aches and pains, less stiff. Also, lots of scientific evidence out there that shows that there's a positive correlation between movement and mood. So movement makes you happy. If you like the movement, you don't, of course. I remember listening to a podcast where the person being interviewed said, have you ever gone out for a walk and come back feeling less happy than you were when you went? I think, weather aside, perhaps, that then the answer is you would tend to feel happier after going out for a walk, even if it's like 10 minutes. Also, there's also a positive correlation, which you'll know more about than me, James, between movement and mental health. So moving has a positive impact on your mental health, and there are longer term outcomes that you can look at as well in terms of your overall health, such as things like your cardiovascular health, diabetes, and so on. There's lots of stuff out there about smoking. Well, yeah, there is lots of stuff out there about smoking, but about sitting being the next smoking. And although I don't wholeheartedly agree that that's the right sort of messaging that we should be putting out there, because I tend to prefer to focus on the positive rather than the negative. And I know that's not great from a marketing perspective, perhaps, but I think that there is obviously lots of information out there about the potential impact on your long-term health should you be sedentary for long periods at a time each day. Talked a lot there.
You did. That's great, though. It's all relevant. It's all very topical for our listeners, and I agree with you. There's never a downside to going for a walk, and also, really, I can't think of a downside to moving when you're sitting at a desk. I always recommend to my clients that they stand, if possible, for their Zoom meetings and their Zoom calls. And I know for everybody that's not possible, but it's the change in your bodily position that is of benefit. And I think that's what people mean when they say sitting is the new smoking, is they're talking about constantly sitting. There's nothing really wrong with sitting for periods of time, but there's a lot wrong with sitting there for 4 or 5 hours at a time, particularly if you're sitting badly, and particularly if you're balanced poorly. You mentioned balance before as being something that you check out in people, Kerrie-Anne.
Mm-hmm. So I think that's right, James. I think the sort of idea that we should be moving frequently and in varied ways is kind of like where we should be aiming for. But noting that, as you said before, that perhaps that might not be possible, or it might feel like it's not possible. And for some people who have what they would describe as being sedentary jobs. So yes, mixing up sitting and standing is a great way of changing the position, but also noting that standing still doesn't require you to use that much energy than sitting still. So still getting your body to move, but it's actually harder to stand still than it is to sit still. So you are negotiating balance a bit more when you're standing, because you're trying to steady yourself, I suppose. But that said, I think, if you do think that, okay, I have a sitting job, it's not possible for me to stand up, they're saying I need to keep my movement frequent and varied, but look, I don't have that much time, then don't see this as a deterrent. So just do whatever you can. Take incremental steps to changing it. So, tomorrow you say, right, first 5 minutes that I put my computer on, I'm going to sit up on my sit bones, which are the bones underneath your bottom, and have my feet flat on the floor, and I'm just going to wiggle around for a few minutes before I start work. So something like that, and then you could even have a sheet on behind your desk, whatever, tick, done that. And then each day you do that, and then you try to find other little gaps for implementing more movement, more postural changes throughout the day.
I think this is really important. What you're suggesting is that people incorporate these activities within work as part of their work schedule, as part of their working practice, rather than saying, okay, well, I'm going to do a load of movement at 7 o'clock tonight. I'm going to go to the gym, which doesn't really undo 8 hours of sitting at a desk.
Yeah, it's a funny one, isn't it? I think the body, as we know, hates stillness. And so if you are going and busting out your moves at the gym or whatever it is you're doing, Pilates, yoga, hips, boxing, whatever, running, for an hour, and then you're still for the rest of the time, your body's not going to be very happy about it. So as much as it's great to do that hour, of course, but as much as you can be fidgeting and doing movements during the day as well, the better that's going to be long term.
I'm laughing to myself, Kerrie-Anne, because whilst we're talking, listeners, we're recording this, I can see myself on the screen. I'm standing on one leg, and then after a while I'm standing on the other leg, and I'm thinking, oh, that's great. I'm just so used to moving whilst I'm working that I take it for granted now. But a lot of people just all the focus is on the work and nothing's on the body at all. And I guess we want to redress that balance. So, Kerrie-Anne, if you were to give...
It's so funny that you say that.
Why?
I was thinking to myself, why is he's talking about this postural stuff and he's got his right leg crossed over his left leg, but it's because you were standing on your left leg.
I'm standing on it, yeah.
This is so funny. Why is he doing that? Now it makes sense.
Yeah, folks, I'm not sat there cross-legged saying, wow, look at me, I've crossed my leg.
On your left, and I'm like, he's got, what, is he sitting? What? That makes sense.
No, I'm pretending to be a stork or a pelican or something whilst we're working.
I'm sat down.
A flamingo, that's the bird I was looking for.
Whoops. I am sat on a stool.
How do you feel? Go on, I've got a Pilates question for you. A lot of my clients ask me about the Pilates balls and using those for a seat. And, you know, I hear a lot of pros and I also hear a lot of cons about it. And I can think of some pros and I can think of some cons as well. What's your take on Pilates balls as a seat?
I personally don't sit on one, but I do have clients who do, and since sitting on them during lockdown, all of the aches and pains they were experiencing on a day-to-day have gone. I think it's really good for negotiating centre when you're sat down because it moves a little bit, a bit like you would when you're standing, but even to a much bigger degree. Also, it's really difficult to sit with your pelvis in a posterior tilt when you're on a ball because it kind of moves, it will put your body forward, so you can sit more easily up on your sit bones. You have to press into your feet to keep you in the middle, otherwise you'll be sliding off side to side. You can use your inside thighs, so that would get you to engage your inside thighs a bit too. So I think that if it isn't distracting, that's not a bad thing actually. From what are the cons that you've heard? Let me see if I can debunk some of them.
Well, I mean, it is a very active sitting, so it's a long time to spend doing keeping yourself upright. They do take up a lot of space, and they don't provide back support. So a lot of people do like the support of the back. They can be dangerous in that
you might fall
I've
off.
heard of. I haven't got any proof of people, them popping or falling off. I think there's a great little YouTube video of Melissa McCarthy, I think it is, the American comedian, trying to work on a Pilates ball and failing miserably, which I'll put a link to in the show notes if anybody wants to see that. She's hilarious anyway. And for a lot of people, I think they do need that back support that they're just not going to get from a bouncy ball.
You can mix it up, right? Because you don't have any back support when you're standing to work, do you? So what's the difference?
No.
My view on that is you've got the equipment to be able to hold yourself up there, and if you need a back support, you've got to question why you need to sit at the back of the chair in the first place. So, it's not like, and I've had this discussion with a physio before where she said, but that means that you're engaging your core the whole time. Well, it doesn't. Well, you are using the muscles that you need to hold you up there, but you're not shouldn't be squeezing your belly in or, gripping your back or anything like that. You're literally sitting on your sit bones and then stacking everything else above it. And if you are bracing body parts and pulling them in, and then it's the same as putting your arm into a bicep curl for 5 hours. Why would you do that? You wouldn't. So you just use the amount of muscular effort that you need to hold yourself up there. And if you've been advised to have a back support because you've got something going on, then of course use the back support. And if you think, here's something that I used to share quite often. The way I see it is, if you are actively sitting while you're working and getting in your movement breaks throughout the day, then you can quite happily go and sit on your sofa and watch Netflix later on when you're resting. Right? So that's the way I see it. And I remember my Pilates mentor, Sarah, coming to my house and my husband trying to embarrass me by saying, "Do you want to see how she sits on the sofa, Sarah?" And then he did a demonstration of it. And Sarah said, "Well, Tim, that's exactly why she does Pilates, so she can sit on the sofa like that." So I think that's
that taught him.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that's a nice way of thinking about it, because why do we need a back support? Why?
I'm totally with you. I think if you're using, I'm with you. If you're using your sitting bones well, then there's a lot of support available to you. And I talk about it with my clients in terms of, are you sitting or are you sat? So I go a bit all English language on them and saying, are you sitting or did you just sat and that was that? And, and there is a distinction between the two. And even just saying it now, our listeners will be conscious of the fact that they're sitting and maybe making minor adjustments to themselves whilst they're doing that.
Is that because
even with back rest, what's that? Sorry?
Is that because I'll have to ask you, because I'm not so good with English language, the English.
Yeah,
language.
So sitting is the present. Sitting is active. Yeah, exactly. In both senses of the word. So sitting is an ongoing activity, and sat is, we'll go French now. Sat's a fait accompli. You've done it, and that was it. I've sat. That's it. Game over. Now I'm going to do whatever. So I get all pedantic. Grammar school education, Kerrie-Anne, I can't get rid of it. I just have to grammarize people wherever I am.
I love it. It's funny enough, because one of my friends pulled me up on using. I don't usually say sat. However, I did say sat in my book launch Q&A section party, and he pulled me up about it. And I was meaning to ask him why, and now you've just clarified that, so that's great. What coincidence!
There you go. I feel better already. The little Shakespeare in me is patting himself on the back. Just regards to seat backs as well, very quickly. Most people don't use them even if they have them. Most office workers will perch on the front of their chair and they're not even. So have a think about that, people. Okay, so my third question is, right now, Kerrie-Anne, if our listeners could do one thing to help their posture, what would you recommend they do?
Pilates.
Really? You surprised me.
No, well, partly, the sentiment is true, moving more. So just trying to move throughout the day, moving. There's a great quote that says, "Your next posture is your best posture," which I take to mean that it means moving in and out of positions is what is good for your body. And I would agree with that. When it comes to sitting, what would I say was the most, when you have to be still because you're doing typing or whatever, and it's not, you can't get on with that, and when you're standing, is to make sure you're sitting on your sitting bones. So that provides the foundation for what goes above and below. And by the way, that includes not crossing the legs, because if you're sitting evenly on both sitting bones, then you wouldn't be crossing your legs because you'd be on one more than the other. So sitting on your sit bones and not being too sort of strict about what happens at the top, because we can end up really like lifting our rib cage up to the ceiling and thrusting our chest forward because we understand that's what good posture looks like. However, that's just moving the orientation of the rib cage. So actually it's not doing anything about the bit between the ribs and the neck, which is the bit that we want to get a bit more extension in. So not worrying about that top bit. Use movement and Pilates teachers and other movement teachers to help you with that bit. sitting on your sit bones and moving. That wasn't one way.
Fantastic. That's plenty. That's plenty. That's enough for that question.
Okay.
Thanks so much, Kerrie-Anne. So it's been wonderful talking to you. If my listeners want to find you, where do they find you?
Well, my website is pilatesatyourdesk.com, and I'm on Instagram at the same name, at Pilates at Your Desk. And I think those are the two best ways to find me.
Fabulous. So I'll put those links in the show notes, and also a link to your wonderful book, Move More at Your Desk, which people can get hold of on a well-known international book retailing company.
Yes.
Apart from that, it's been absolutely fantastic to speak to you. You clearly practice what you preach. Have a great day. Goodbye, Kerrie-Anne.
Thank you, James. Take care.